Hi everyone, this is Crispy1001 at kpcoolstuff.com. This is our 26th video on how to use Blender and the Blender2FSX add-on to make models for Flight Simulator 10. In video 26, we're going to be animating the tail wheel, and I'm also going to show you how to set up control cables and setting up animation constraints, so a object will follow a certain path when you animate. This video was requested by Chris Mott at FSdeveloper.com, so thank you, Chris Mott, for requesting this video, and I hope it helps. Also in this video I'm going to be using the JDL aircraft that I modeled for Flight Simulator for this tutorial. So if you do not have it yet and you want to follow along with this tutorial, go to fsdeveloper.com, click on Resources, click on Aircraft Design, and then click on JDL Blender Project, and then Download. Once you have that, we can open Blender, and you'll have basically this same model, except the coloring scheme may be a little bit different. So what we have set up here excuse me, is we have a tail wheel set up with a control horn for rotating or pivoting that tail wheel. We have cables running from the control horn from the tail wheel up to the control horn of the rudder, and then we have the control cables coming from your foot pedals from the cockpit going to the rudder control horn. So that's these cables here and the cables going down here. So what we need we need to set up some empties that are going to be used for constraints and for parenting. So I have set up two empties, one for the left side of the control horn, the other one for the right side of the control horn. I have empties up on the left side of the rudder control horn and the right side control horn, and I also have empties inside the fuselage that I want the control cable to follow the path to wherever I have that empty located inside, so that the cables will look like they're operating correctly. And let's show now how we have everything set up. So once you get your empty set up, go down, and it's best to turn on X-ray. So you can see on this item I have X-ray, that's so you can see through the objects you're going to be using, so you can see your empties. So the first thing we want to do is select both of the empties that is in the rudder control horn. So I have both of them selected, and I'm going to click or shift click, and I'm going to select the rudder control horn. We're now going to parent the two empties left and right to the rudder control horn. So Control P and set parent to object. Then we're going to go down and we're going to choose the empties that we're using for constraints for the tail wheel. So I'm going to click on them. I name them tail wheel lower left constraint, tail wheel lower right constraint, and then I'm going to click on the tail wheel itself, and I'm going to parent those two to it. So Control P and set parent to object. Now we need to click inside. Let me go to a top-down view of the empties that we're going to be using for the control cables going from, or simulating going from the rudder pedals in the cockpit to the rudder control horn. But these are used to keep that in a constraint or an animation constraint following wherever you put these. So let's click on them, and then let's click on the body, and we're going to parent them to the body. So Control P and set parent to object. So now if we click on all those and you go down to your properties for that object, you'll see that parent is body, parent is body, parent is rudder control horn, parent is rudder control horn, parent is back landing gear, which is basically the landing gear fork itself, and back landing gear. So we have everything parented now. Now we'll work on the objects being used as the cable control, or the cables. So if we click on this cable, what I've parented all 4 objects that are being used as cables to the empties on the rudder control horn. So if we click on this object, you'll see that tail wheel upper left constraint, which is this empty here, this object is parented to that, and this object is parented to the tail wheel upper right constraint, which is this one right here. If you click on this one, you'll see that it's parented to tail wheel upper right constraint, which is this one right here. And this object here is parented to tail wheel upper left constraint, which is this one right here. So now we have our objects being used as our control cables parented to the middle, or to our rudder control horn empties. Now we need to set up constraints that these objects will follow and point to the area that we want them to follow. So this lower cable here is going to parent from here, so it's going to stick to this object here always. And we're going to have it to always point to this object here, which it will follow because it's parented to the tail wheel landing gear. So let's go to that object. We're going to go to constraints, which is the linked chain. Now you can see I already have mine set up, but I'll show you how I get to this point. Also, also remember that once you get each one of your objects in the location, the rotation, and the size that you want, remember to do on each object have selected and go Control A and set rotation and scale. If you do not do that for each object, when you do this track to, it will not track to the object that you want it to track to correctly. So remember to do that process, or make sure you set the scale and rotation for that item to default at the position that it's at right now. So let's go ahead and set the constraint for this one. So we're going to go Add Object Constraint, and we're going to do a Track To. Click on Track To. This window here will open, and you need to choose your target. So if you click on Target, now you can see that we want it to track to tail wheel lower left constraint. So you would scroll down until you find your tail wheel lower left constraint and click it. So now we have our target set to. Leave everything else default and change the orientation to -Z. So now if we click on this empty, that is now our constraint for this object here. And if we hit the G key, you'll see that that object is now tracking everywhere we point that empty to. It will follow it. Hit escape to go back. So that one's set up. Let's go to the left side and right side. Do the same thing. Choose that object. Go to add constraint. Track to. Click on your target. Go to tail wheel lower right constraint. And then if you click on that one and grab, it will do the same thing once you have it set. Hit escape. Now we need to work on the upper control cables. Remember, it is parented to this one here, so it'll always stay connected to these empties here, but we want it to track to this empty here. So click on that empty. Oops, I'm sorry, not that empty. Click on your control cable, and we're going to add a constraint for that one there. You just need to remember what the name is. So this one here was rudder cable left constraint. So we'll click on that object, go add object constraint, track to, click in here, go down to rudder cable left constraint. So go down, and there's your rudder cable left constraint. Click on it. And on this one, you want to have it track to y-axis. Now if you get that one, and if you move it, now you can see that that one follows that one. Hit escape, let it go back. Now let's do the same thing to the other side. Click on the cable, go add object constraint, track to, select your target as rudder cable right constraint, and set track to y-axis. Now same thing with this one. This one is now pointing to it. Escape. Once you get that all set up, you can see if everything works correctly. So let's go to our back landing gear or tail wheel, and let's do a rotate z-axis, and now those cables should track to that movement, and you can see they are. Okay, so let's go escape. Now let's rotate the rudder and see if everything else tracks. Go rotate and Z. Now you can see that everything else tracks as well. Now of course the ones down in your tail wheel won't be doing it right now because we'll have to animate it and the rudder both separately. But you can see that the cables are following the control horn. Now I'm going to have to pause for a minute. Sorry about that, my little dog was barking. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is start setting up for the animation. So let's make sure we have our starting set to 0, our ending set to 100, and set our position to 0. So let's start tagging things now. So we're going to have an animation tag and animation keyframes for everything that is moving or everything that is controlling the movement of an item that is going to be moving as well. So, if you click on the tail wheel itself, and we need to make sure that we have it set up to rudder %key is the animation tag, and length is 0 to 100. And if you watched my other tutorials, you'll know how to go in and set up those animation tags. So remember, you'd have to go to Blender tab. You go to FSX animation tool, do the drop down for that. You open that up, click on rudder and enter. Hold on, initialize tool set. I didn't initialize the tool set yet, so it didn't load my model def information. Okay, so there we go. And we want to go down to rudder %key, click on it, and then hit assign. And it will attach that rudder animation tag to that object. You need to go through and choose that rudder % on everything that's going to be animated. So we have to click on our empties, because they're also going to be moving, because they're going to be controlling the movement of this cable. So they're also going to have the animation tag. You can see rudder %key, and this one as well, rudder %key. The cable's going to have rudder %key. Of course, the rudder control horn, I'm sorry, not the control horn, because it's already parented to the rudder itself, but the empty that is going to be moving with the rudder has to have a rudder %key. Same thing with the other one, rudder %key. Its cable is going to have rudder %key, and this rudder %key. Now the empties in here controlling the constraint for these cables here, they are not going to be moving, so we do not need to have to put any type of animation tag on them. Only the items that's going to be moving and controlling the movement of something else that we need to put an animation tag on. Now let's start doing our animations. So we're going to click on the rudder, and I know this isn't a rudder tutorial, but I'm going to go ahead and animate it anyway, because you're going to have to. Remember in FSX that you need to start your frame 0 in a left hand turn for your rudder, and I'm going to rotate this to 20 degrees. So I'm going to hit rotate Z by 20. Oops, wrong way. Escape. Rotate Z minus 20. Enter. I'm going to add a keyframe, I key, and rotation. Then I'm going to go to my tail wheel. I need to set it to the same position, so I'm going to do a rotate Z minus 20, enter, and I'm going to set a keyframe for it. I, rotation keyframe. I need to set a position for the cable. Oh, I'm sorry, first let's do the empties. So this one has to have a keyframe. And these won't be rotation, they will be location. So location, click on this one, I and location, click on the cable, location, add keyframe, location, add a location and a keyframe for this one for location. For the cable, to location, go to the other side, add keyframe for location, and keyframe for location. Now, to make sure that every item has a keyframe set up for it, you can scroll back up on the object, the property for the object, and as long as you see in location or rotation yellow, you have a keyframe for that position. So let's check. Here is the the tail wheel. We have a keyframe. Tail wheel lower, we have a keyframe. That's the left one. The right one, we have a keyframe. The cable, we have a keyframe. We have a keyframe. We have a keyframe for that empty. We have a keyframe for that empty. A keyframe for that cable. And a keyframe for that cable. Okay, so that's good. So now we have our animation set up for the 0 frame with all our keyframes. We're now going to move our animation location to 50. And we're going to re-rotate our rudder now. So this time we went -20. We want to go back to a neutral position. So we're going to move it in a positive 20 degrees. So rotate Z 20 and enter. We'll do our keyframe for it now. So I, and this will be a rotation. Let's move in and do the tail wheel now. The tail wheel. So let's do rotate Z and 20. Enter. I for a rotation for that. Now let's do our cables and our constraints. So we need an I and location. I and location. I and location. I and location. I, location, I, location, I, location, I, location. Okay, so we have all of our keyframes for our animation position 50 added. Let's go ahead and hit File and Save, because we don't have to redo this if something locks up on us. Now let's move our animation to 100. Click on our rudder. And we're going to rotate it another positive 20. So rotate Z 20. Just add a rotation keyframe. We'll now click on our tail wheel. We will rotate it on the Z-axis by a 20 degrees. Hit I and rotation. Now we need to do our cables and constraints again. So I, add keyframe for location. Add location keyframe. Add a location keyframe. Add a location keyframe. Add a location keyframe. Add a location keyframe. Location and location. Let's go File and Save again. Let's change our animation position back to 0. And now you can hit play. Let's line up. And play. Now you can see that our cables and our tail wheel are moving nicely. Escape. Let's rotate. Let's go in. Let's go inside so you can see it. You can see that the cables are following the path of our constraints in the inside. And you can see right here that our cables are following our constraints to our control horn for our tail wheel. So we can hit stop the animation, put back at 0. Remember always to set your animation back to 0, or when you run your model file or output your model file, your animations will not work correctly in FSX. It will be truncated. So that is the end. I hope this helps everybody. If you have any questions, please email me or contact me at fsdeveloper.com. I thank you very much. Bye.